All right, so homework as far as what's coming up, right? We've got chapter 8 and 9, and then we are finished, right? So this week, tomorrow, we have chapter 8. And chapter 8 is a really easy one because if you go over here where it says my videos and homework, and you click on that, and you go down to chapter 8, here's the homework. It's exercise 2 and 3. That's it. Right? So there's no excuse to mess up this one. This is it. All right, so just keep that in mind. Exam 4, due by the 17th, but let's see the window between December 13th and 17th. Right? 13th and 17th. So there you have it. 3 questions on the exam. If we take a quick peek. What do we got here? Oh, this has to do, I think it was chapter 7, right? Special order. Should we accept the special order or not? Remember we looked at, if I remember correctly, the example in the book was, well, similar, but not exactly the same. Had to do with IKEA. Remember that? Should they, it had to do with their food service, remember? Should they continue to do the food service themselves, or should they give it out to somebody else? And then I think we did something for homework like this. The key to remember when you're doing problems like this is that a lot of times your instinct is to say no. For example, if you look at this, the company received a special order for 2,160 units at a special price of $155. And then if you look at the costs, it costs $160. So who would do something like that, right? Who would sell something for $155 that cost you $160 to produce? The key is the fixed overhead. So if we didn't have this fixed overhead, what would this be? 160 minus 45 would be 115, right? Our unit cost would be 115. Would you sell something for 155 that cost you 115? Yes, you'd be making a product of $40 a piece, right? Times 2,000 units. 40 times 2,000 is what? 80,000? Yeah, I would do that, right? Then if you wanted to achieve a $45,000 profit, what price would you have to charge? Okay. I think we did that as well. If the company is operating at full capacity and cannot fill the order without harming normal procedures, what effect would it have on the company's short-term profit? Right? Well, if they're at full capacity, they can't accept the order. Right? So that was one problem. Here's another one. Okay, now this is, should we make or buy something, right? They manufacture a product. They manufacture a subcomponent, in other words, a part. They have a product. Let's say the product is, I don't know, say it's an airplane, right? And they make some of the parts that go into the airplane, but other parts they have to buy from somebody else. But now, one of the parts that they make, they want to look at having somebody else make it for them. I don't know if you remember that. I think that was also chapter 7. Right, and here's another one. This comes from the chapter we're going to do today. Has to do with budgets. Now, in the last chapter, we talked about budgets, but we really didn't do anything with numbers. We were just discussing theory. So in this chapter, we're going to look at actual numbers. Okay, so let's see. So let's take a look at the video. I think it's about 20, oh, it's 26 minutes long. Hello, class. Hold on, class. I have to stop the recording. So you see what's involved with this, right? Let's see if we can do another problem. Okay, let's take a look at this problem. Evanson Company expects to produce 500,000 units of their product during the year. Monthly production is expected to range from 40,000 to 80,000 units. The company has budgeted manufacturing cost per unit to be as follows. Right, so you see direct material, direct labor, variable manufacturing overhead, and fixed overhead. Prepare a flexible manufacturing budget using 20,000 unit increments. In other words, start at 40, go to 60, then go to 80, right? It was similar to what we did for homework. Where is it? Yeah, let's take a look. Sorry. This first problem. Right, notice here that we had a budget at 4,000, 6,000, 7,000, right? Based on a master of 5. So we don't have to do a master. They gave us the amounts that probably came from the master to make the flex budget. So if you want something to, I don't say copy from, but something to use as an example, you can look at that, or you could also look. Let's see. You could also look in the book on page 397. Oh, sorry. Yeah, here's another example of what it would look like. Right, so maybe I'll leave this up. But try to do that homework problem using this as your guide. It's not going to let me put 2 up at the same time. So I'm assuming you can find this on your either on your computer or on your in your book if you have a book. So let's put back the problem itself. Sorry to keep flipping around like this. Right, this is under the what they call the mini exercises. Right, number 5. Right, now what makes this one different than the one we saw before, again, it's in this case it's the fixed cost. And the one that's for homework, you weren't given these unit costs. You were given a master budget, right? And then you were told to make a flexible budget, but you weren't given the per unit amounts. So you had to figure out the per unit amounts before you could do the flex budget. Here, they gave you the per unit amounts. So you can do the flex budget. The key is the fixed overhead. In this particular problem, the key is the fixed overhead. So they're telling you that the fixed overhead is $3 a unit, but what's the total fixed cost? What's the total fixed cost? It's $3 a unit times 500,000 units. So that's $1.5 million in total. But if I divide that by 12 months, it comes out to $125,000 a month. right? Monthly production is expected to range from 40,000 to 80,000 units, right? So let's do that again. You're expected to produce 500,000 units for the year, right? If I divide that by 12 months, yeah, see, I don't like the way that came out to a weird number. So if I take the 500,000 units and I multiply it by this $3, that's $1.5 million for the year. $1.5 million in fixed overhead for the year. If I divide that by 12, that's $125,000 a month. So when you set up that schedule like this, fixed overhead will be $125,000 across the board. Right, $125,000 across the board. So I'll leave this up, right, and try to do that problem, mini exercise number 5, right, which is on page 422 in the book. So let me leave this up. Oh, where did it go? I'll leave this up, right? Take about 15 minutes, and then we'll go over it. But just remember, we're here where it says 18,000. Yours is going to say 125,000, right? And then I'll walk through all the calculations like I did here when we get to the answer. All right, so take about 15 minutes to do that. Okay, so I don't know where you are, but let's see what we can do. Right, and this was, they call this M5-5, and this was on page 422 in the textbook, right? So let's set a spreadsheet up. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this first column master budget / standard costs, right? Because here they gave you the standard costs, those amounts they gave you for direct labor, direct material, variable overhead, and fixed overhead. It's disguised kind of, right? They gave you those standard costs, but those standard costs probably came from a master budget. So that's why I'm referring to it that way. And then we're going to have flex budget 40,000 units. Remember, they're telling you that they're going to make 500,000 units for the year, but they expect to make between 40 and 80,000 units per month. And they wanted you to make the flex budget based on 20,000 unit intervals. So 40,000 plus 20,000 is 60,000 units, right? And here, 60,000 plus 20,000 is 80,000 units. Okay, so direct, I'll abbreviate. Direct material, they said, was $4 per unit. Direct labor was $5 per unit. Variable overhead, VOH, was $6 per unit. Okay, so we would just multiply 40,000 times 4, get a number. 40,000 times 5, get a number. 40,000 times 6, get a number, right? And then do the same thing, 60 and 80. The key here was the fixed, FOH, fixed overhead. Right now, they said the fixed overhead was $3 per unit times 500,000. So this isn't going to work. $3 per unit times 500,000 units, right? Which is equal to 1,500,000. Right? But remember, these amounts are monthly. So if I take that and divide it by 12, right, that's 125,000. And maybe let me do this because it's messy here. Let me say here it's $3 per unit, right? But let me do the calculation down here. 3 times 500,000 equals 1,500,000 divided by 12 months equals $125,000 per month, right? $125,000 a month. Let me put like an asterisk there. And then I'll put another asterisk over here so you see where the number came from. So this number is 125, 125, 125. Okay, so, you know, again, that's a little bit, you have to think a little bit about something like that. It may not occur, you know, naturally to the way you think. Right, but that would be the equivalent of this $18,000 number here. Notice here when we did the problem here, I said, don't worry about it. Okay, and I forget if they gave you the number. I forget. I don't think they did, or if they did, I just told you to ignore it. Right here, you couldn't ignore it entirely. You had to use it in your calculation. Okay, so where are we now? Now the rest of it just becomes a matter of arithmetic, where we're going to multiply 40,000 times 4, 40,000 times 5, 40,000 times 6. All right, so what does that come out to? That comes out to 160,000, 200,000, and 240,000. Right, and if you add that together, 725,000. Now I'm going to do the same thing here, but this time I'm going to multiply by 60,000. So 60,000 times 4, 240. 60,000 times 5, 300,000. 60,000 times 6, 360, plus the 125, total 1,025,000. And here, we're going to multiply the per unit amounts times 4. So 80,000 times 4, 320. 80,000 times 5, 400,000. 80,000 times 6, 480. And the fixed cost is still 125. Comes out to 1,325,000. So that's another problem. Practice if you need to. Right now, let's see where else we are. Is everybody okay with this? I mean, I just talk and talk and talk, but I just, you know, if I was in a class, I could look at you in the eye and I could see if you're okay. You know, I can't do that on the computer, unfortunately. But does anybody have any question about any of this?
No, you're making it pretty easy to follow along.
I hope so. Again, you know, with practice, these things get easier. Okay. So let's see. Let's go back, because when I was looking at the exam questions earlier.
When is our next exam?
Well, see right here, you can click on this,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll tell you.
Oh, December 17th. Perfect.
Let's see.
And that's like our final exam, right?
Well, it's the last exam, but it's not a final.
Okay. Are we having like a final?
No.
No? Okay, sounds good.
It's on the last 3 chapters, but it's really not. It's on 7 and 9. 8 doesn't really show up on there. Let's go back to chapter 7. And let's take a look at those homework problems again. I mean, you can watch the video. You should watch the video. But I'm just thinking of what questions were on the exam. And there was a special order question, right? I remember that. That was the first question. There was a special order question. Should we do the special order, right? Somebody comes to you and says, hey, look, I want you to make these things for me, and this is what I'm willing to pay you. And it might be less than what you're used to getting. So initially you might say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to lose money on the thing. But when you think about it for a second, you say, wait a minute, you know, I've got fixed costs that have been met already by my other customers. This is going to be a special one-time deal. This person's going to come in here and they're going to pay me less than I would normally get. However, since my fixed costs are already covered by my other business, I'll only have variable costs as my real costs. Should I take it? Right? And if you remember this example here, this was a company that made like CDs or DVDs of rather than guests. Let me go back and look. All right, now I'm going over this with you because you had a test question like this, right? So I'm not doing this because I feel like wasting my time or yours. This was on page 333. right? Exercise 7-6, right? So this is similar to the question you have on the exam, right? So it's worthwhile to look at. So MSI has been approached by a fourth grade teacher from Portland about the possibility of creating a specially designed game. I guess it's a video game that would be customized for her classroom and environment. The teacher would like a game to correspond to her classroom coverage of the history of the Pacific Northwest and the state of Oregon in particular. MSI has not sold its products directly to teachers or school systems in the past. In other words, they never did anything like this before. But its marketing department identified that possibility during a recent meeting. So they were thinking of doing something like this. The teacher has offered to buy 1,000 copies of the CD at a price of $5 each. MSI could easily modify one of its existing programs about US history to accommodate that request. So they made a CD about US history that they could change a little bit here and there to accommodate this teacher who wanted the history of the Pacific Northwest, right? Which is states like Oregon and Washington and Idaho, right? The modifications would cost approximately $500. So we would have to spend $500 to take our existing product and change it into the product that this teacher wants. A summary of the information related to production of their current program follows. So the direct materials are $1.50, the direct labor is 60 cents, the variable overhead is $2.25, and the fixed overhead is $2. Now, the fixed overhead we can pretty much ignore, right? Because again, just like we've seen in these other cases, the fixed overhead is something that we would have spent anyway. This is a special order. This is above and beyond what we currently do. So let's figure out, what do they want to know? Compute the incremental profit from accepting the special order. Okay. Now, remember, the teacher said that he or she would be willing to pay $5 each for those CDs. So if we did that, if we sold the 1,000 CDs to the teacher at $5 each, we would have taken in an additional $5,000, right? Simple, 1,000 times 5. Well, how much would it have cost us? Direct material, direct labor, variable overhead, forget the fixed overhead now, comes out to $4.35. To make 1,000 CDs would cost us $4,350 in variable cost. We would also have to spend the additional $500 to modify the existing program, right? So would we make any profit on this deal at all? We'd make $150, right? So you could argue $150, you know, it's, at least we're not losing anything. Let's do it and see what happens. Or you might turn around and say, I don't feel like doing all this extra work for $150, right? But if you were thinking of going into that market anyway, it might be a good idea, because now you can use it to show other teachers and other school districts that you're capable of doing this kind of work. You can custom tailor a CD to their curriculum, for example. All right, so should they accept the offer? Yeah, I mean, as an accountant, I'd say, yeah, as long as you're not losing money, it's probably worthwhile to try, right? So you're making $150, right? You should do it. What about part 3? Suppose that the special order had been to purchase 1,000 copies of the program at $4.50. $4.50. So you say, well, mate, it's only 50 cents less. What's the difference? You know, maybe we should still do it. But if you work all the numbers out, the revenue would be 4,500, not 5,000, right? 1,000 times 450. The variable costs would be the same. And we still have this $500 modification cost. We would lose $350. We would lose $350 if we took this on. And you know, $350 is really not a lot of money. You may want to do it anyway, just for the opportunity to be able to introduce this to other teachers and other school districts. But you know, most accountants would say, no, if you lose money, don't do it. All right, now here, you had a question like this in your problem. If MSI was operating at full capacity, how much would it have to charge the teacher for the gain? In other words, if they were operating at full capacity, they would have to charge whatever the normal selling price is. But in this case, they would also have to charge an extra 50 cents because of that modification cost. Right? So if you were at full capacity, that means you really can't produce anymore. You can't produce anymore. So if someone came to you and asked you to produce more, you would probably have to say no. But in order to say yes, because again, you don't want to lose money, you would have to charge at least what you charge normally, plus anything extra that you would have to pay. So in this particular case, what would you have to pay extra? You would have to pay this $500. And if I divide that by 1,000 CDs, it comes out to 50 cents. So we would have to charge this teacher, not the $5 that she wants to pay or he wants to pay. That person would have to pay $12.50 for us to make the same kind of profit that we normally make. All right, so I'm showing you this because you have to do it for homework. You had to do it for homework anyway, but because it's going to come up again on the test, right? And again, if you've never done this before, to do it for the first time when you're taking the test is not going to be the easiest thing in the world to do, right? So pay attention to this. Go over it again. All right, now let's see. What else? What else was on the test that I think you should look at? Right, so that was the first question, right? Similar to that homework problem that we just looked at. Right? So let's see what about the second one. Right. This was buying versus making, right? So we had another homework problem like that. This one here, exercise 7. Right, so let's take a look at exercise 7 again, right? Now, again, we've done all of these things before. You can watch all these videos again, but, you know, it's worth taking a second look. So this is our exercise 7, also on page 333. MSI is considering outsourcing the production of a handheld control module used with some of its products. The company has received a bid from Monty Legend Company to produce 10,000 units of the module per year for $16 each. The following information pertains to MSI's production of the control modules. So it costs us direct materials, $9, direct labor, $4, variable overhead, $2, fixed overhead, $3, total cost $18 a unit. MSI has determined it could eliminate all the variable costs if the control modules were produced externally, but none of the fixed costs. Right? In other words, if you have a building that you're paying rent on and you don't use that part of the building anymore, you still got to pay rent. You won't have the variable costs, but you still have the fixed costs. Compute the difference in cost between making and buying. Okay, well, here's the cost of making. 9, direct material. 4, direct labor. 2, variable overhead. You don't include the fixed overhead. So it's costing you $15 a unit times 10,000 units. It's costing you $150,000. If you buy it, you've got to pay $16 a unit times 10,000 is $160. You're better off making it. All right, it's costing you $10,000 more to buy it, so you're better off making it. Now, what if, right, this is part 3. Part 2 says, yes, we should continue to make them because it's less expensive. Part 3, suppose that the space currently used to make the modules could be utilized by a new product that would generate $35,000 in annual profit. Now what? Well, it would still cost you $150,000 to make them, right? Same as up here. It would still cost you $160,000 to buy them. However, you could use that space to do something else to make a profit of $35,000. So really, it didn't cost you $160,000 to buy them. It really only cost you net $125,000. So now you would actually come out ahead $25,000 if you bought them from somebody else. Okay, but the only reason it came out that way is because you had an alternative use for that space. You had an alternative use that was going to generate additional profit, right? If you didn't have that, like you had up here, it would continue to make sense to make the thing yourself, right? So again, you had a homework problem like that, an exam question like that. Right, and here was the last question. Blossom prepared the following master budget items for July. Master budget. Now notice, I don't see any per unit amounts, right? So here's the master budget. The master budget is predicated on 22,000 units. If we made 22,000 units, this is how much we would spend. Well, what if they actually sold 28,000 units? Prepare a flexible budget based on 28,000 units. Now, it's not asking you for any variances, right? It's just asking you to prepare a flexible budget. And we did a problem just like that. Here we go. In fact, it's kind of a combination. Yeah, I'd say it's more like this one, exercise 9-2. that we had to do for homework in chapter 9. You're going to have to come up with the per unit amounts, right? You're going to have to come up with the per unit amounts. If we go back and look, right, you don't have per unit amounts. So you're going to have to calculate the per unit amounts and then multiply by, well, in this case, it's 28,000. You know, everybody's test is different. So in this case, it's 28,000, right? But remember, your fixed costs are your fixed costs. They don't change, right? Your fixed costs are your fixed costs. Okay. So before I give everything away, do you have any questions? No? All right. Now, we're finished with everything, but we still have 2 weeks left. And so next week, what I want to do is I will answer any questions you have about the homework that's coming due, right? Because we'll have class on Thursday and the homework is due Friday, right? And then I want to spend more time reviewing for the exam. Right, we'll go over it. We'll try to do these problems again so that you get a better feel for doing it. So your first priority has to be to get your homework done, right? So your chapter 8 homework, that's due tomorrow. So that's the first thing you have to do. But that shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes. Right? And then get working on chapter 9. Right? And then I'm not saying to start the exam, but go over these problems again that I just went over with you today. And then we'll review some more next week. And then after next week, we will pretty much be finished. You know, as always, I'm available to answer your questions. You know, send me an email. If you want, we can still have that last day, we could still have a class that day, but you know, it'll just be to answer your questions. So do you have anything to say? Besides adios? Arrivederci? Au revoir?
Professor,
Yes?
this is the last class?
Well, we're finished with everything. No, it's not the last class. I just told you it's not the last class.
Oh, okay.
But we're finished with everything. So next week, I said I would review more with you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
There was an old song, an old Simon and Garfunkel song. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. It was called The Boxer. And there was a line in that song, a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. That's appropriate for today. Anything else? So I'll be with you next week. Don't worry. I'll be with you next week. We'll go over the homework, any questions you still have about the remaining homework, and then we'll review for the exam again. We'll do more work together. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. So have a nice weekend, but not too nice. And I will see you next week, same time, same place.
Have a good one, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
You too.